I'm late. Sorry for that. It's been a weird day. I'm still fixing the server stuff too, clearly. I think I got this set up close to right now. It's gonna be a little off. If you're OCD, my apologies.
I could tell you one time, don't
There.
want it with us.
I think I finally got it.
I could tell you one time, that we'll fuck you up.
So anyway,
I could tell you one time,
good evening.
go grab your gun.
If you made it to my late
Tell you
start,
one time, this day will I
then good evening. And welcome to, well, the War Room. Or as Jimmy likes to put it, it is. I'm gonna cut it a little short here today. Just because we started so late. It's not that I don't like playing the whole intro, but it's quite long. So, anyway, good evening. Welcome to the War Room. This is day 156. If you're not catching this live and you're catching it on the replay, that's cool too. We did start quite late today. That is my fault. We had several things happen today. Some was work related, some was show prep related, some was panelist debate related, actually. We got into a pretty good discussion, and it sort of slowed me down setting up everything for today's show, so my apologies for that. But yeah, we're here. We are 5 months in to this incursion into Ukraine. We're working into our 6th month, if I'm not mistaken. We're 156 days. Overseas, it is actually already day 157, but I make the cutoff today, Friday news. So we have those stories for you. There are many. So this may run a little long, but we'll try to get through them as quickly as possible because obviously your time is as precious as ours too. So anyway, I've got two panelists. I think I'll have a third one coming in here shortly, but let me go ahead and bring in Mikhail Knightstrikesky and Scott P79. So good evening to both of you. I had totally borked the start by forgetting to fix the Discord room and the audio gain and all that stuff. So my bad. Anyway, you're both here, yeah?
Duh.
Duh.
I
Okay.
know.
Okay. So before we get into the stories of today, before we deal with the issues of things happening overseas, I thought what we would do is talk about what had happened in Congress today. News of the day. Breaking news, as a matter of fact, if you weren't aware. We were under the impression throughout the week that the assault weapons ban proposal in Congress died because there was no support for it. However, I think it was late last night, Congress decided that they were going to change a few parts of the bill. They renumbered it after they hammered out the details today, and then it went to vote, and then the vote passed the House. The assault weapons ban passed the House. So, I'm not going to claim to know this. I want to hear from you, my panelists and audience, if you can answer the why. When we were watching the live stream today of the vote, I kept hearing the magic number today was 218 or 219. They needed that many to pass the bill. Now, for those of you who are unaware, the House of Representatives consists of 435 members. Unless something changed, which I don't think it has. And it was my understanding that a bill proposal that is to be considered for, well, the law of the land, it was my understanding that it required two-thirds majority vote in both houses. So if you have a calculator and you have even the most basic grasp of mathematical knowledge, then you would know that two-thirds of the House, 435, is 291 with a little extra. So I don't know if it's 291 or 292. They didn't reach that number. They were like 70 votes away from that number, and yet the bill passed. So if you know why it passed with less than two-thirds, I would love to hear it. Scott had a theory that it's because they changed the rules and because they don't give a shit about the way that our country's run and how our laws are supposed to be created, that they just threw it by the wayside like they do everything else in this country. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I swear that the only changes that they're allowed to make are procedural changes leading up to the vote. So, like for instance, we talked about the what was it? The nuclear option, right? In the Senate, so they can get 50 plus 1 to push bills through. Those were Senate procedural proposals and changes to get voted on, not the actual bills, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm not claiming to be the utmost authority on this because this is slightly out of my wheelhouse on short notice. If I had more time to really dig into it, I could probably come up with a better answer, but I'd really like to know how or why 218 or 219 was the magic number today to allow it to go on to the Senate. But if the two-thirds majority thing sticks,
How many voted yes?
I think it was 219 or something.
Okay, then that's a simple majority
Okay.
instead of a super majority, which is 2/3.
Right, but doesn't it require two-thirds for actual passages of law?
No, they can have a simple majority and still pass it.
In both houses?
No, in House of Representatives.
Okay, so it's two-thirds for the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well in that case,
Well, it's 2/3 for the Senate and it's 2/3 for the House. But for the House, a simple majority is 218. A super majority is 2/3,
okay,
or 290 votes.
so they can get through, but
They can,
at the
yes.
Senate level. So what I'm trying to lead everyone to here is, we were discussing how we were just going through social media and maybe even a couple of YouTube channels, and people are in a freaking panic, and it's like, calm your tits, relax. Because if it does require two-thirds in the Senate, there is no way in hell they're getting 67 votes.
Well,
Because for those of you who are unaware, the Senate is 100 people, 2 from every state. And to pass a law in the Senate is two-thirds, which would be 67. Right
I
now,
want
it's
to put this out there for anyone who's freaking out.
right.
If you in the last election voted for anybody with a D in front of their name, this is your own damn fault. And
Yes.
I'm going to end it with that.
I'm
Well,
going to go with the you can go fuck yourself.
just take it and go. But let me try to put your mind at ease, everybody. A two-thirds majority vote in the Senate will require 67 votes. There's 100 senators, two-thirds is 67. If the current makeup of the Senate is 50-50, as it stands currently, then one would argue, well, if it was 50-50, then Kamala Harris had to go in there and break the tie, right? Well, let me inform you that they don't have 50-50. What they do have is the Republican Party gains 2, and both of them are from very, very pro-gun states. So they would be committing political suicide if they attempted to actually vote against it. They gain 2. However, they lose 3, because one would argue that Susan Collins from Maine Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and possibly Mitt Romney out of Utah might
You're
vote.
also you're also ignoring the nuclear option.
No, the nuclear option is for procedural changes. That's the point. It's for procedural changes. It's not for the bill vote, at least on as far as I'm aware. And I think it's only used in emergency situations or extreme cases, which
Oh.
okay, they can try. I guess they can try it, but I don't think they're going to get it. Either way. So, what do we got here? We gain 2 from Manchin and Cinema, but we lose 3 possibly from Murkowski, Collins, and Mitt Romney. So then it becomes 49-51 again, right?
I don't have any trust in Mitch McConnell either. So throw him in there too.
Well, yes, but see, you have to think of the states that they're in, okay?
No,
So
I've lived in Kentucky. Okay, nobody likes Mitch McConnell, but he keeps getting elected.
right, but that's I swear, dude, it's like I don't think when you have people like say a 22 Plinkster and like a Hickok 45 and a John Hickok and those guys, I don't think they're going to sit on their laurels about this. First of all, they're probably making the calls. Then they're going to go on social media and blast it like crazy. Call your senator, call Mitch McConnell, and be like, yo, if you think what liberals do to you at restaurants is bad, wait till we get our hands on you. Stuff like that, right? So there's that. It's a
Well, he
very,
doesn't
very
care.
pro-gun state. Well,
He
right,
doesn't
because he
care.
knows he's
That's the
not going to
problem.
be there much longer. I get that. It's like, wow, let me just shit in the bed before I walk out of the hotel. I get that. But if it still requires 2/3, even with those numbers, they're still not reaching 67. Even if you give them Mitch McConnell, even if you give them Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Mitt Romney, okay? Now they've got 54. They still need 13 more. And there are, what do you call them, red state Democrats that are running for re-election this year. Political suicide, right? Do you think they're going to commit political suicide this year? No, because they already know they're going to get wiped out in the midterms. Right now, everything is a mad
Well,
dash to get everything done before the midterms because they know they're going to lose the majorities. So they want to fuck it up as much as possible before November.
technically, they only need 60 votes. They don't need 67.
2/3 is 67 out of 100.
I know, but technically, they can get it passed with 60.
How? That's not numerically possible.
I don't know.
Just 2/3 of 100. It's 67. It's 66.6666667. So they say 67. That's why it's a big deal, that number. Just like the 218 thing for simple majority versus super majority, which I guess you found out, which is great because that was beyond me at this time. I don't know, but if the 2/3 thing sticks in the Senate, that is a Herculean mountain to climb, especially during a midterm. And if they pass it, Jesus Christ, you're right. We got the government we deserved because half you idiots voted for those stupid people who did this to us.
I didn't vote for Democrats. I'll
I
tell
didn't
you that
either.
right now.
I'm sure Scott didn't either. I'm sure most of his friends in Maine didn't vote for Susan Collins either. One could only hope.
Yes.
Anyway, if you guys in the chat, which I see the numbers keep changing, but I don't think they update properly anyway. If you know the rules of the supermajority or the passages of bills, feel free to put it in the chat. I am open to absorbing that information. It's just from my general understanding, at a cursory glance. If it's still 2/3, then we're still fine. It will die in the Senate. And bear in mind, it's going to take a while from it to leave the House and go to the Senate, right? So like a couple days. And then they're back, right? They're back from a summer session, so they're going to be at work now. But if they're not, then they're not in session, the Senate. But if they are back, then yes, they're back, and they're going to go through a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing or whatever the fuck they do nowadays, where they have
They're
to sit there
back
and,
from outer space.
where they have to sit there and gripe about it one at a time, and everyone gets 30 minutes to speak. It's going to drag on for a few days, and this whole time is the time where all the influencers, all the social media people, GOA, even maybe the NRA, they're all going to start blasting your email, and they're going to be like, yo, this is about to happen. make sure you contact your congresspeople, make sure you contact your senators. Well, fuck it. Don't contact your House representatives anymore because that's already out of there. Contact your senators. Put pressure on your senators. Put pressure on whoever you have to put pressure on. But you're going to get these hot and heavy all weekend, and you're going to get them hot and heavy all throughout the week, and it's going to become more frequent and possibly sound more desperate the closer we get to the Senate vote. So, yeah, find out everyone who's running for re-election this year. Find out what parties they're from, find out where they stand on this, because that's where you crank maximum pressure. Absolutely. Because this is either going to turn into a red wave, or this is going to turn into a whole lot of nothing but a bunch of bans because the red wave got squashed. Got to be careful about that kind of thing. Anyway, that's all I got on that. I wanted to take the time to address that because that's a big deal for most of us. We're mostly 2A-minded individuals. That's why you're here. Unless for some reason you came from my penny arcades, then welcome. Welcome to something that you probably didn't expect that we were going to talk about. But we usually talk about the war on Fridays. It's just, this is going to lead to a lot of civil disobedience on both sides. Bar none. I think we're at this point now where enough is enough. Most of us have felt like enough is enough. And someday,
I think you're downplaying it by saying just civil disobedience. I don't know.
no,
For some
no,
people, there's
I
a
know
line
what
in
you're
the
saying.
sand.
I know what you're thinking, and
I'm not going to say it.
I know what
I'm
you're
saying what I'm thinking.
implying. And what I would say, or what I would suggest, would sort of put the kibosh on that, is that would require planning, logistics, leadership, field general type people, medical type people, transportation type people, electronics type people, runners. I think you know where I'm going with this. Everything we don't have. Everything we don't have.
Or you could just wait for the next congressional baseball game.
No, it just happened, actually. Republicans shut out the Democrats and wiped them out for the second year in a row. That happened 2 days ago? Yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yeah, but the what was it? 3 years ago,
2 years
the
ago, Steve
Democrat
Scalise.
I was gonna say a couple years ago, didn't a Democrat try and wipe out the Republicans? Literally.
Bernie supporter did that
Yeah, they took a shot at Steve Scalise.
with an SKS.
Was it?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, that already happened. But anyway, Washington D.C. looks like freaking Jurassic Park right now, with all the fences and barriers and bullshit. So, no.
Well, they certainly have dinosaurs there.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They're all in the Capitol building, as a matter of fact. Okay, you know what? We're going to talk about that then too. I saw a picture today, and we have seen the news about this all week, about Nancy Pelosi announcing that she. First of all, if you're going to do a geopolitical diplomatic tour, you don't announce it to your potential enemy. But yet they did. And now China's really pissed off that Nancy Pelosi is going to Taiwan. And they even threatened her and us. Which...
Can they do us a favor and actually make good on that threat?
Yes, I said the same thing as a joke, and I'm probably on a new list now because of it. But yeah, if you're going to go, just go. Don't announce it to the entire world. Like George W.
Yeah,
Bush
but Nancy
didn't...
Pelosi needs her fucking ego stroked.
Well, see, okay, so let me ask you something. She's not the Secretary of State.
No.
She is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is domestic. It has the majority of representatives compared to the Senate because they are supposed to have their finger on the pulse of the people at the local level. So she is the leader of that branch of government. If I wanted to equate this, if you don't want to send a state or the Secretary of State to do geopolitical diplomacy, then you don't want to send your version of the FBI there. You want to send your version of the CIA. Because the CIA generally handles things abroad, and the FBI generally handles things domestic. So it's like you could say that the House of Representatives is sort of like the FBI, and the Senate could sort of be like the CIA in a way, where they handle domestic, diplomacy. If the Secretary of State can't do it, right? So why the fuck is the Speaker of the House going to geopolitical diplomacy meetings and then announcing it and telegraphing it to invite herself for, I don't know, a missile to her plane?
All I have to say is, if China wants to make threats all they want, they are more than welcome to make threats. Now, if they want to do something against Pelosi, I'm not going to cry.
Don't. That's sedition. Don't. No. Don't do it. Don't do it. I know what you're
I said I'm
thinking.
not going to cry. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Okay. All I'm saying is if they're gonna do it, just fucking do it. Don't tell us. If you're gonna shoot, shoot. Don't talk. Anybody know that quote?
Ooh.
Tuco. Anyway, no. I got a better idea. How about we adopt a policy in this country that says if you look like a walking corpse with a chronic case of rheumatoid arthritis and a neck that looks like a bull elephant's nutsack, you are not allowed to go abroad to represent the country because you are telling the world that this is the best we had to offer. The Chinese are choking on their green tea, laughing at the prospect of this ghoul of a woman with
That
the
green
neck.
tea was Japanese.
Whatever.
Can we just force feed her $3,000 ice cream?
I don't care
Yeah.
what it is. She still has the neck of a nutsack of a gray bull elephant. You don't
Oh,
send a ghoul to represent us because we don't look like her. We don't look
speaking of
like
Oh,
her.
you
We
ghouls,
mean
don't
why
like
is Feinstein
sending
still
Joe
in office?
Biden?
we don't think like her. We don't talk like her. We don't like her. So
You mean
why
like
do we let
sending,
her represent
wrinkly
us?
old Joe?
No. 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 We send Lauren Boebert. We send Kirsty Nome. We want them to walk in, and we want like Xi Jinping to go, "Hi, baby." No, all right, enough. I'm just joking. No,
And
I'm
Lauren
saying if you're
Boebert
gonna,
to go meet Putin.
yeah,
She
with her
just walks
rifle,
in and puts a bullet in him.
exactly. I know what you were thinking. That's why I said that. No, honestly, if you're gonna send someone to represent the nation, send somebody who looks authoritarian and dignified and not like somebody you can push over by shouting at them or with the wind shift. Like Nancy Pelosi is literally one hailstorm away from being like, I don't know, looking like she got hit by a machine gun. Like she looks so frail and weak and pathetic. And it's like that's the best we had to
Yes, she
offer.
is.
Well, yeah, I know, but that's why I'm saying, why did we send her? Why did we send the why didn't we send the Secretary of State? Why didn't we send Antony Blinken? Oh, that's
Because
right, because he's too
Blinken is
busy with
useless.
Ukraine. Well, no, he's busy
Too
with
busy
Ukraine.
blinking.
I don't know. He looks like a vampire too. Whatever. Okay, so all tangents aside now, yeah, I don't think we
They're
should have
not
sent her.
aside, but we're gonna move on.
Yes, I don't think we should have sent her, honestly. And if we did, you shouldn't have said anything. George W. Bush never announced he was showing up to see the troops at Christmas Eve. He just showed up, and everyone was like, "Oh, cool!" Right? If you want to show up to Taiwan, you can tell the president or PM. Is it president in Taiwan? You can tell him, "Hey, we're sending someone over." You don't put it on fucking CNN. And then here have Xi Jinping going, if you send her, we will shoot her. It's like,
Well,
and?
as I
And?
told you, yesterday, if I wanted to listen to somebody who doesn't care about the country, I'd watch CNN.
Yeah, well, I'd listen to David Hogg.
Wow, that's bad.
That's bad, huh?
I don't think I could live with myself after that one.
I would love to sit down in front of David Hogg for 5 minutes. I would be smart and cordial and polite, and I wouldn't tip my hand. First of all, I wouldn't even let him know that I was carrying. And second of all, I wouldn't tell him that I was a gun guy, right? I would just sit down and be like, "Thanks for taking the time. You're obviously from the generation after me, so this is kind of a new thing for me. This is interesting, but I'd like to ask you a few things if you have the time." He's like, "Sure, whatever, cool." And I'll say, "Well, first of all, uh, are you the love child of Judd Hirsch and Robert Francis O'Rourke? And how fast did you have to pedal your bike with your noodly little legs and your skinny jeans from California back to Florida because you weren't actually at the Parkland shooting? You fucking fraud." And then he would know I was a gun guy. And then I would just get up and walk away. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on to the stories because we have many. And if you have listened to my diatribes in the audience and you're not offended, thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, you survived. But yeah, if you have answers for the vote thing, please leave them in the comments at least or something. I will read them because I'm just trying to be a little more informed of this. I ran into this a little half-cocked tonight, but I just went off my
Or
basic
post in the side
understandings.
chat.
Yeah, I'm doing this off my basic understandings. So if I'm wrong, I'm open to correction. Like you can say, no, 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 that's not how it works anymore. They changed it at this date, or they changed it after the passage of this bill, or whatever. And I'll verify it, and I'll be like, okay, cool. It's just we need to know because obviously it's a very important issue. I always tell my mentor, because he's part of the Constitutional Convention of the States, and as am I now. And I had told him, I actually have a second Discord, by the way, just for those guys. And I told them all, I said, look, uh, many of you don't know who I am yet, but you probably will very soon. And one thing that I'm going to sort of put out in the ether now amongst all of you is I will be able to tie every single legal law or governmental issue to a Second Amendment case. And they said, "How is that even possible?" And I told them, "Well, simple, because everything is tied to your defense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And anything that the government does to or for you may have to be either defended by or attacked with your right to keep and bear arms. Easily, your right to fight for those things. Whether you agree with those things and you fight for them, or you disagree with those things and you have to take up arms and fight against them." And then I also told them the other most important thing for the Constitutional Convention of the States is to reiterate the point that the very entity that the Second Amendment was constructed to rein in has no legal authority to tamper with it, and yet
You,
we have allowed it, and
you
we
may
shouldn't.
also want to get a copy of the 1755 and 1785 dictionary by Johnson.
For
Why? Because you need the definition of infringe and infringement, you
hmm
know, clearly defined. And by the way, if you look at the 1755 version and the 1785 version,
hmm
the definition didn't change.
good. I mean, my point is the very entity that the amendment in the Bill of Rights was written for. That entity has no legal authority to mess with it because it was the ultimate check and balance given to us to keep them in line. And they keep trying to neuter it to prevent us from correcting the system because they think they know better than you because they think they're better than you. But they're not. They're supposed to be you and me. They're supposed to be representative of us. And they don't represent us anymore. And if they don't do that, then they got to go. And if they don't go peacefully, then people get clapped. That's how it works. That's how it always works. That's why we have that. Anyway, that's why they keep trying to neuter it. And the fact of the matter is every single barrier and ban and denial of your rights is a direct infringement on those rights. And every law that they put up there is just one more that'll be ignored by criminals. So
Now who's talking sedition?
it's like, well, no, I mean, you pass a million new laws, and it's just a million more there that the criminal will ignore, and it's just a million more barriers that get in our way, and leave us more vulnerable to the criminal. That's the whole point. You know, like I raised this argument the other day. If I could sit down in front of Congress and say, like Howard Hughes style, okay, kick my feet up on the table, make everyone look like my bitch, and walk out after a mic drop moment, I would say, you all have had, this is true by the date, by the way, you all have had 88 years. 88 years. This year, 88 years of stifling, deliberate, direct infringements on the law abiding citizenry of this country. And you did it in the name of public safety. And yet, the public never got safer. But what they did get was more vulnerable and more frustrated by the fact that they are more vulnerable to attack by the very thing you were supposed to protect us from. You've had 88 years to do it. You kept taking and taking and taking, and the enemy got stronger and stronger, and we got weaker and more vulnerable because of you. So, that being said, what makes you people think for a second that anything else that comes out of your mouths, first of all, is going to work, and second of all, be believed by us? It ain't. So here's what I propose. In the interests of reciprocal fairness, give me 10 years, like we gave you 10 years back in 1994 against our wishes. Give us 10 years of 50-state constitutional carry, 50-state national reciprocity, 50-state, or no more NFA, no more GCA, no more Hughes Amendment, no more crime bill, no more anything. Give us 10 years to prove to you that an armed society is a polite society. And if we can prove to you in 10 years crime took a dramatic drop, because nobody in their right mind is going to walk into any place because no place is a soft target anymore, then it becomes permanent. But if we can't prove it in 10 years, we will give you the option to argue a case to sunset it. Not sunset it. We'll give you a chance to prosecute or defend or argue a case to sunset it. And if you can prove a case that would convince us to say, okay, well, we tried it and at least you let us try it, fine, then you can sunset it. But if you can't prove your case, then it becomes the law of the land, and that's the end of it. See, because if you do that, there's no more ATF, because we don't need them anymore, right? And if you do that, then the government has just admitted that they were wrong the entire time. They won't do it because it was never, ever about public safety. It was always
All
about
control.
It's in the name. It's only about control. It was never about public safety. Ever.
They don't give two shits if you die.
No. And the funny thing is they're called cliches and platitudes, but they're mired in truth. When seconds count, the police are minutes away. Look no further than the Indiana mall shooting. It was a guy who went into a gun-free zone with the intent to murder, and he killed 3 people in 15 seconds, but was put down immediately by another person who went into a gun-free zone and said, "Your stupid rules be damned, I will not be a victim." And he stopped the spread of more victims on their behalf and became a hero for it. We don't need an ATF. We don't need. The police were nowhere there, were they? That guy stopped mass murder in 15 seconds. 3 people still died, which is a tragedy. It's unfortunate. How many people would have died if that shooter had as much time as that asshole in Uvalde? How many people in a mall would have died then? Because if that guy didn't stop that shooter, this bill today would have been a unanimous shutout vote. But there were plenty of people who argued on our behalf and probably brought up his case. They probably brought up the Sutherland Springs Church guy too. They probably brought up Mark Robinson. They brought up people who help our case, which is why the vote was as tight as it was. And to their credit, not a single Republican voted for that bill today. Not one. And to their credit, 3 Democrats
They want to get
voted.
reelected.
Right. But to their credit, 3 Democrats voted against it too. I want to know who those 3 Democrats were. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi wants to know who those 3 Democrats were. Because she wants to browbeat them with her ghoulish face if she doesn't get shot down over the Sea of China. Anyway, sorry. I know it sounded like a real rant and tirade, but a lot happened this week, and you need to be aware of it if you weren't aware of it, and now I hope you're a little better aware of it. Take the information. Don't squander it. Do something with it. And if I'm off, correct me, and I'll do something with that. It's fine. I don't mind being wrong. I keep telling people that. I think Scott has probably heard me say this more times than anybody else. It's like sometimes he'll say something. I'm like, hey, I learned a thing today. Thanks. Humble pie, right? Anyway. Don't ask me where B-29s launched with the nuclear bomb. I got the island completely wrong, and the one I thought it was still wrong. So, good job, Scott. Anyway. Well, like I said, I don't mind. It's just there were reasons why we did certain things, and mine was a bit off. He was right. But there was an ingress point, too. And there was a survivability thing, and there was a big push for certain things. I mean, there's truth in everything, in all of what we talked about, I think. But there was a fact where the Enola Gay launched from, and I got that one totally wrong. All right, so let's move on. Gunmetal Guy is here. He makes that face like he's indifferent, and I always wonder if he's bored. But then it's like he says later on, he's like, no, I'm just telling you I'm here. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you can always do this, just so I don't feel so weird. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the stories, because I already wasted 40 minutes of your time. My apologies. First story of the day, I'm going to start with Saturday, which would have been last Saturday, which would have been July 23rd, which was day 150 of this incursion into Ukraine. We're going to go ahead and get into the geopolitics of the day now. Before I get started, I want to remind you, no, this is not a plug for a sponsor. I did update the scroller. That was the last thing I did before we went on air, because I was getting ready to hit the button, and I'm like, ooh, shit, I got to fix that. So that's why a little later than I promised you. Anyway, scroller's up to date. Some of the numbers you're going to find are pretty good sized changes. Some of them are going to be no changes, and some are going to be very paltry changes. Explanation, troops are getting killed because troops are still being deployed. Planes are not getting shot down because planes are not being deployed. Helicopters, same thing, not really. Boats, same thing, not really. Cruise missiles, UAVs, shit tons. Armored vehicles, metric shit tons. They were busy this week, as you're about to find out. So, my first story actually sort of has Mike in mind. I call it the Odessa strike with a Y. U.S. and Ukrainian authorities on Saturday accused Russian forces of attacking the port city of Odessa not even 24 hours after the ink was dried on a deal that was signed to allow safe passage for grain exports. The enemy attacked Odessa seaport with Caliber cruise missiles. 2 missiles were shot down by air defense forces. 2 hit the port's infrastructure facilities. Head of Odessa Regional Military Administration, Sergei Bratchuk, said on his telegram. It is unclear at this time if anyone was hurt in the strikes. His strikes is with an I, sorry. The U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, condemned the attack and called it outrageous. Russia strikes the port city of Odessa less than 24 hours after signing an agreement to allow shipments of agricultural exports.
It's totally outrageous. Their strikes need wise.
The Kremlin continues to weaponize food. Russia must be held to account. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman Oleg Nikolenko said Russia will bear full responsibility for the global food crisis. It took less than 24 hours for Russia to launch a missile attack on Odessa's port, breaking its promises and undermining its commitments before the UN and Turkey under the Istanbul Agreement, he says. Officials from Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey and the United States sealed the agreement Friday to allow merchant ships to to transport urgently needed food supplies through the Black Sea amid the global food crisis. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied already. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres championed the deal as an agreement for the world as developing nations grapple with food shortages and famine following the 5-month-long blockade over Black Sea ports. Guterres was light on specifics involved in the agreement, but said that 3 Ukrainian ports, including Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Yuzhny, would be opened to allow for significant volumes of food exports. But on Saturday, a spokesman for the UN said that the Secretary General unequivocally condemns reported strikes today in the Ukrainian port of Odessa. All parties made clear commitments on the global stage to ensure the safe movement of Ukrainian grain and related products to global markets. These products are desperately needed, the spokesman said. Full implementation by the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and Turkey is imperative. Because if you didn't know, they provide, 33% of all the world's grain exports? That's quite a bit. Details regarding a preliminary agreement suggested the treaty would require Russian President Vladimir Putin's pledge to uphold a ceasefire so Ukrainian naval vessels could escort merchant ships. Ukrainian vessels would guide the merchant ships by first sweeping the mine-infested waters on their way to Turkey's Bosphorus Strait. But while officials applauded the negotiations, several questioned whether Russia would actually respect the terms of the agreement. Victoria Nuland, U.S. Undersecretary for Political Affairs at the State Department, welcomed the news Friday but said this came together because I think Russia ultimately felt the hot breath of global opprobrium. It's now incumbent on Russia to actually implement this deal, she said, from the Aspen Security Forum. Before the treaty was signed Friday, former intelligence officer in Russian doctrine and strategic for the Defense Intelligence Agency, Rebecca Koffler, said even if the deal is signed, the Russians will not likely live up to its proper implementation. Duh. There's a reason why Putin, in addition to missiles, uses energy and now food as weapons, not only during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but also as part of Russia's broader geopolitical and security strategy, she added. Russia will use this deal as leverage to try to extort concessions from the West. This is Putin's standard playbook. Turkey is yet to publicly comment on the strikes. That was last Saturday. I don't think Turkey has still commented 6 days later on that strike. They're just like, you know what it's like? Little sidebar here. I won't take up too much time. Russia, the United States, Turkey, and Ukraine went out to dinner together last Friday. And everybody ordered the meal, and everybody ate, and everybody broke bread, drank beer, got along. Russia was slapping Ukraine on the back. Ha ha, comrade, buddy, everything is great. We have great vodka, we have great food. That waitress's tits are great. It was great. Everything great. Well, Saturday rolled around and the bill came. And Russia smacked the Ukrainian. And Turkey, he became an astronomer. He didn't want to pay the bill, so he just started staring up at the ceiling like he couldn't see it. That's what's going on right now. And the United States is just sitting there going, what the fuck? Because guess who's holding the bill? If it wasn't obvious. Turkey, it's time to pay the bill, or at least recognize that there is one in front of us. Moving on. Did you like my little Russian impression with the big-tittied waitress? Yeah. Anyway.
Niet.
Yeah.
Niet.
Niet.
Well, fuck y'all. I'm gonna pull a Jimmy. Well, fuck y'all.
Because you're forgetting something.
What?
Putin will never live up to the deal.
No, I know. He was even in the story. But anyway,
Which
Turkey.
is why the Ukrainians blew up that fucking bridge.
We're gonna get to that. Spoilers. All right, moving on. This is the vampire with soulless black eyes, and he's not going to Taiwan because apparently Nancy Pelosi's going. 2 Americans believed to have been fighting in Ukraine have died in the war since Russia's invasion earlier this year. We can confirm the recent deaths of 2 U.S. citizens in the Donbas region of Ukraine. This came from Antony Blinken. We are in touch with the families and providing all possible consular assistance, the spokesman added. Out of respect for the families for this difficult time, we have nothing further to add. No, you just don't want to say their names. I get it. Maybe it's a national security thing. On Friday, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that new U.S. military assistance for Ukraine, including more HIMARS advanced rocket systems and other weapons. The people of Ukraine inspire the world as they defend their country and their freedom in the face of Russia's brutal and unprovoked aggression, Blinken said. The U.S. continues to stand with its allies and partners, word fucking salad, for more than 50 countries in providing vital security assistance to support Ukraine's defense of its sovereignty and territorial integrity against Russia's aggression. You know, I swear to God, I'm sorry, I didn't even want to read that because it felt like I just pulled a string and heard that message come out of him. Because doesn't he say the same thing every day? I guess that's his job. At least 3 other Americans were reported to have died fighting in Ukraine. In March, Blinken confirmed that an American citizen had been killed there, and the New York Times reported that local police said 68-year-old James Whitney Hill had been killed in the city of Chernihiv. His identity was confirmed by Anton Gerashenko, an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. In April, Brittany Cancel confirmed to Fox that her husband, Willie Joseph Cancel, had died fighting alongside Ukrainian forces. The 22-year-old Marine veteran left behind his wife and a 7-month-old son. Some of you may remember I covered that the day his death was announced. He was the one that took a picture in front of Mount Fuji. He was once deployed in Japan. That guy. Notice I didn't say that kid, because he served. He did everything he could. In June, the State Department confirmed the death of 52-year-old Steven Zabielski, who was reportedly killed in May. We can confirm the death of U.S. citizen Zabielski in Ukraine. State Department spokesman, whatever. We have been in touch with the family and provided all possible consular assistance. See, they pulled the string. It's the same message again, right? It was exactly the same message. Anyway, that's his job. He's a puppet. He's only allowed to say what's on his little tape. Moving on, so we can get through these quickly. And this is part of a bridge in Kherson. Now, I've got 2 stories for this. Scott's probably going to want to jump to the second one, but let me get through the first one first. But we'll probably show this picture twice. Heavy fighting in the southern region of Kherson continues to rage as Ukrainian forces increasingly rely on U.S. rocket systems to battle it out with Russian troops over a critical bridge, the UK Defense Ministry said on Saturday. So we're still on Saturday. It's about 8:30 p.m. when this story broke. The Antonovsky Bridge, which crosses the Dnieper River, serves as a major strategic target for the Ukrainian defense as it connects the Russian army in Kherson to occupied areas off the Crimean Peninsula. For those of you who don't know, there is a land route between Kherson and Crimea, and that is the bridge to it. It's, if you look at the map of it, it's quite a gap. That's a pretty good-sized bridge. Like, it's not the one that you see in Louisiana. Not that long, but it's still a pretty good-sized bridge. And it has anti-aircraft missile systems around it that you could not imagine. Like, that thing is a porcupine of AA. So, attacking it, keeping it, or destroying it, major goals for both sides, obviously. Moving right through this, Ukrainian forces have been relying heavily on a U.S.-supplied high-mobility artillery rocket system, HIMARS, which allows them to deploy multiple rocket launches effectively. They need these because they got to get in, fire, and get the hell out before the other missile systems come back at them as counter battery. That's why HIMARS are so important, because they're very quick, which one would argue M107 Paladins are too. Anyway, the system damaged the bridge earlier this week, so that's the damage. If the Dnieper crossings were denied and Russian forces in occupied Kherson is cut off, it would be a significant military and political setback for Russia. But UK defense officials on Saturday said that they believed, as of Friday, Russia has made repairs to the vital bridge and that some traffic was still able to pass through. In the last 48 hours, heavy fighting has been taking place as Ukrainian forces have continued their offensives against Russian forces in Kherson Oblast, west of the Dnieper River. The ministry said this is their intelligence update. They usually do these every day. The supply lines of the supply lines of the Russian forces west of the Dnieper River are increasingly at risk. The defense ministry said that it had heard claims from Ukrainian officials that Russian troops may look to build a pontoon bridge over the Dnieper River to circumvent damage to the major thoroughfare, but intelligence officials said that they could not verify these claims. The Russian army prioritizes maintaining its military bridging capability, but any attempt to construct a crossing of the Dnieper would be an incredibly high-risk operation. Well, yeah, you would be sniped to death trying to do that. Anyway, U.S.-supplied HIMARS have proven effective along Ukraine's front line, as it is capable of firing multiple rockets up to 50 miles. Some of these rockets have hit several Russia arms depots, as Ukrainian defense official confirmed earlier in the week. Good evening, Mad Sexy. Russia on Thursday boasted of its ability to counter the U.S. HIMARS and claimed that it had shot down 12 missiles over the Antonivka Bridge. One should not be afraid of HIMARS. One should fight it. It is not a panacea. It is one of the weapons that the enemy uses now. Andrei Kartopolov, head of the Russia's State Duma Defense Committee, told Russian media. Sorry, that was a freaking Cyrillic I wasn't ready for. The system is serious, but there is a countermeasure: our air defense facilities. Good evening to you, HVS. The Russians are coming. Just got an Airbnb booking from Moscow. Guest will be here in a couple of hours. Right. All right.
Whole plane load of vodka.
Yeah. All right. So that was Saturday. Let's go on to Sunday. I think I only got two stories for Sunday. Yeah, two stories for Sunday. So we'll get through these pretty quickly. I called this one Boots to Ass. Let's see what this is. Here we go. Ukraine's military delivered a successful attack on a Russian ammunition depot in southern Ukraine Saturday night. So this was kind of the crossover. Leaving 54 Russian soldiers dead and destroying 3 tanks, the government said. Operational Command South announced the assault on 3 Russian T-62 tanks. Boy, you were fucking desperate. 3 Grad MRLS, 1 MSTA-B howitzer, and other armored military vehicles. The attack occurred on the 150th day, going into day 151, of the Russia-Ukraine war, which many experts believed would only last 48 hours, or 2 weeks at its longest, as Ukraine is advancing through the Kherson region to recapture its territory. The occupiers tried to gain a foothold there, in Kherson. Their collaborators made various brazen statements, which in Russian are called the very apt word, oh my god, I'm gonna try this. I've never heard this word before. It's Shapkozaki Sveto. Whatever. It translates to I know what it means. It's just I can't pronounce it. It means fake news, essentially. False forecast is the actual literal definition. I'm gonna try to learn that word so I could say it one day, but it's like Shapkozaki Telsto. I don't know. Fuck it. I'll get it later. But how did it help them? The armed forces of Ukraine are advancing step by step in the region. Ukrainian President Zelensky said this in his nightly address. The attack comes as Russia delivered a missile attack on Odessa, also in southern Ukraine, which may further devastate negotiations. Today's Russian missile attack on Odessa on our port is a cynical one, and it was also a blow to the political positions of Russia itself, Zelensky says. If anyone in the world could still say that some kind of dialogue with Russia, some kind of agreements are needed, see what is happening now. Today's Russian caliber missiles have destroyed the very possibility for such statements to exist. And we see the absolute unanimity of the world's reaction to this strike. The occupiers can no longer deceive anybody. Among other things, as a result of this strike, the building of the Odessa Art Museum was also damaged. The missile hit very close to the historical objects of Odessa, something that is an asset not only for Ukrainian culture, but also for the culture of Europe, he added. This apparent Russian barbarism brings us even closer to obtaining the very weapons we need for our victory, he says. The attack also comes as the international community made several gestures to helping Ukraine this weekend. President Biden and the United States Congress announced $270 million in additional security assistance to Ukraine, including 4 HIMARS systems, 36,000 rounds of 105 ammunition, 580 Phoenix Ghost drones, and additional anti-armor weapons and other equipment and vehicles. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith also visited Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, and met with Zelensky, while Kazakhstan President Kasim Jomart Tokayev also spoke with the Ukrainian leader over the phone. UK's Boris Johnson visited a training site where Ukrainian soldiers are being trained by the British Armed Forces, and NATO announced additional reinforcements to its own eastern border. In general, in these almost 5 months, we have achieved such large-scale and diplomatic support for Ukraine that Russia will not be able to oppose it, Zelensky says. He concluded, "The day will come when missiles will lose their meaning for the occupiers. Now it is possible to shoot down some of the missiles. The goal is to shoot down each one, and we will do everything necessary to still get modern and effective air defense systems. This is our goal." Russia's first invaded Ukraine back on February 24th. Negotiations to end the war have mostly stalled despite continued international pressure and sanctions on Russia. Let me catch up on the chat for a second. HVS says he got general combat boxer underwear off of Amazon. Won't tell guest my underwear was made in Kyiv, Ukraine. Gen 2 underwear. I have no idea what that means. Gen 2 underwear. Maybe it's visible with night vision goggles because it's got IR built into it. I don't know. Maybe there's a strobe on the bung bung. Moving on. Next photo, I titled this Russian claim. So let's take a look. Oh, yes, right. Russia claimed responsibility for a missile strike on the port city of Odessa that just came one day, so this is a recap, after Russian officials agreed to allow Ukraine to export grain from the city. Ukrainian and Russian officials reached an agreement to allow exports from port cities like Odessa on Friday, only for the missile attack to occur the following day. US and Ukrainian officials immediately accused Russia of carrying out the attack, but the country did not claim responsibility for it until Sunday. Russian officials say that the strike only hit Ukrainian military targets, including a warship. Ukraine does not release the details about what targets were hit or how many casualties they sustained. Grain storage facilities were not affected by the attack, however, Ukrainian spokesman told the Washington Post. U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Bridget Brink condemned the attack in a weekend statement. Russia strikes the port city of Odessa less than 24 hours after signing an agreement to allow shipments of agricultural exports, she wrote on Twitter. I already said this part before in another story. The Kremlin continues to weaponize food. Russia must be held to account. Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine has left the country, one of the world's top grain producers, unable to effectively export its supply, causing shortages in Africa and the Middle East. Odessa has faced repeated missile strikes since the outset of Russia's invasion in late February. Quick little sidebar here. If you're having food shortages in Africa and the Middle East, and you need to get food back to your countrymen if you are in countries in Africa, in the Middle East, why don't your governments commit military forces to assist Ukraine to help defeat Russia so you can get the grain exports back to your home countries? Just a thought. Because most of those countries aren't in NATO, so they're not beholden to the rules. Just a thought. If you're hungry enough, you'll fight for the food. Just saying. And now we move on to Monday, June 25th, day 152. Here's a photo for you. A lot of these pictures are going to have to do with Odessa because the attack was a travesty. Okay. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine hit the 5-month mark on Sunday, Ukrainian President Zelensky pledged to continue inflicting the greatest possible losses on his enemy. Even the occupiers admit we will win, Zelensky said in his video address on Sunday night. We hear it in their conversations all the time, in what they tell their loved ones when they contact them, because they're intercepting. Ukraine will celebrate the Day of Ukrainian Statehood on Thursday, a new national holiday that was decreed by Zelensky last August. Stay tuned, I have a story about what happened Thursday. We'll get there. This decision will help emphasize the continuity of more than 1,000 years of Ukrainian statehood. It will be a factor in resisting Russia's hostile narratives of Ukraine as a fake state. Ruslan Stefanchuk, the chairman of Ukraine's parliament, said last month about the holiday, "We must win back every inch of our history." Maybe we should learn from that guy. We must win back every inch of our history. I'm going to repeat that. We must win back every inch of our history. That includes the Bill of Rights and every monument that has disappeared in the last couple of years. Anyway, hopes for renewed peace talks between two countries appeared to falter when Russia struck the Ukrainian port of Odessa on Saturday with cruise missiles. Russia claimed that the strike was only targeting military targets, but Zelensky said it destroyed the very possibility of any dialogue with Russia. The countries had just signed a grain shipment agreement that called for a ceasefire around vessels and port cities involved in the initiative, according to a copy of the agreement obtained by the AP. Fighting has coalesced in recent months around the eastern Donbass. Russia claimed victory in the Luhansk region and is waging an offensive in the other province that makes up the Donbass, the Donetsk region. A senior U.S. defense official said later this week that the Kremlin has already committed 85% of its total fighting force in Ukraine. They can't keep it up forever, the official says, noting that the Russian chain of command is struggling due to the loss of captains, colonels, and generals in their ranks. Mike, your homework is to find me an updated list of that casualty list. You don't have to do it today, but maybe for next week, okay? They have expended a lot of smarter munitions. Their capabilities are getting dumber. I would say their officer corps is too. Moving on. I got to get these really quick before Scott falls asleep too, just in case.
I am not falling asleep.
Not yet. Not yet. You're not on call yet,
No,
are you?
I just drank a soda.
Ah.
I am.
All right. So yeah, don't forget your homework assignment. Anyway, Ukrainian troops are finally seeing a boost to their war effort as the impact of U.S.-supplied HIMARS systems have successfully stalled Russian forces on the front lines. This came from Yuri Sak. Yes, Yuri Sak, advisor to Ukraine's defense minister. They have not progressed anywhere in the last 2 weeks, Sak said in an exclusive interview. I'm going to giggle every time I say this guy's name. Their offensive is pretty much stalled at the moment. The conclusion is that they are not able to beat back Ukrainian armed forces in the conventional arts of war. Russia has depended heavily on artillery strikes, with an I, throughout the war, but Moscow's stalled abilities to push forward with ground forces have prompted a greater reliance on missile strikes in civilian areas. We've managed to slow them down on the front line. We've managed to stabilize the front line, but at the same time, they're still shooting missiles at cities across Ukraine, the defense official explained. This is why they resort to the tactics of terror. However, Sachs said Moscow's heavy reliance on artillery and its inability to effectively advance ground forces has given Kyiv an effective operational strategy to repel Russian troops. The HIMARS has become the top dog in Ukraine's defensive posture, because it has enabled Ukrainian forces to hit Russia where it hurts the most, its eastern and southern ammunitions depots. The M142 HIMARS has proven particularly effective, given its range of about 50 miles. The missile system is reportedly more effective than previous artillery deployed to Ukraine, and as it is essentially a rocket system mounted to the back of a truck, its high mobility makes it more difficult for opposing forces to target. Counter battery, we talked about that earlier. The U.S. has so far pledged to send at least 20 HIMARS to Kyiv. We're very thankful for the U.S. government and the U.S. people for their unprecedented support. I'm telling you this sincerely from the bottom of my heart, Sachs says. Small children in Ukraine, without exception, know the word HIMARS now. They will start calling their kittens and puppies HIMARS. he added, in a stark reminder of how deeply every Ukrainian has been affected by the war. I don't know if I would name a dog HIMARS, but I sort of understand the sentiment. I don't think the Japanese called their cat Fat Man or Little Boy, though. Just a thought. Maybe we did. I don't know. However, the Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov said that his forces need at least 50 systems, like the HIMARS, to hold back Russian forces, and at least 100 systems for an effective counteroffensive. U.S. defense officials estimated that Russia has deployed 85% of its fighting force. But even with military aid provided by the U.S. and other Western nations, SAC warned that Ukraine is still short of what it needs to fight effectively. The Ukrainian armed forces have been outnumbered and outgunned, he said. We still need more because the front line extends over 1,500 miles. It's huge. It's huge. It's a distance between Warsaw in Poland, who was here before we went on air, and Barcelona in Spain. Is that true? From Warsaw to Barcelona? That is long. It's a distance which almost the entire length of the US-Mexico border exists, he explained for context. SAC argued that Ukraine needs longer-range missile capabilities, like the Army Tactical Missile System. I swear it says ATACMS. It's ATACMS, which has a range of roughly 185 miles. The longer range of fire would allow Ukrainian forces to more effectively launch counteroffensives against Russia. However, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, speaking from the Aspen Security Forum Friday, that President Biden is not yet prepared to supply Ukraine with certain missile systems. One of them are long-range missiles. I'm just going to call them ATACMS because it's just easier for me. Which have a range of 300 kilometers, explained Sullivan. He does believe that while the key goal of the United States is to do the needful support and defense of Ukraine, another key goal is to ensure that we do not end up in a circumstance where we are heading down the road towards a third world war, he added. Is he fucking stupid? We're already in it.
Yeah.
Like, we're already in it. You got to stop denying the fact that we're in it, okay? There is a war going on, and the entire world is involved in some form or fashion. That's what a world war is. This is how we got involved in the previous two world wars. Arming and choosing sides. And then eventually we committed troops. This is no different. Or this will probably be no different. Anyway. However, SAC pushed back on this line of reasoning and argued Kyiv has made clear that it has no intention to strike targets within Russia's internationally recognized borders. You say that. You say that. No, we're not going to attack Russia. We're going to give the system to Chechens and maybe they attack Russia. Just saying. Sorry. We just want to deoccupy our land, and we want to be able to defend our people. Fair enough. The defense official said that Ukraine needs more than just advanced missile systems to counter Russian forces. Defense systems, armored vehicles, tanks, and modern combat aircraft are essential if Kyiv wants to liberate its occupied territories. The defense ministry has broken down its strategy across Ukraine into 3 different operational objectives, including stabilizing the Eastern Front with the goal of liberating the temporary occupied territories. The second component is the gradual liberation of occupied territories in southern Ukraine, and finally, preserving the security of its northern border. We understand that we cannot sacrifice one of these components and gamble and hope that nothing will happen. We have always been prepared for any turn of events because we know that we are facing a very unpredictable and deranged enemy, SAC says, which is probably true. Ukrainian President Zelensky and NATO officials have argued that Russian President Putin's war in Ukraine is not only an attack on Kyiv's sovereignty, but is a threat to the entire Western world. You don't say. SAC said that for this reason it is imperative that allied nations do not hold back in their military aid to Ukraine. We cannot allow this war to go on into a frozen conflict, he warned. This will be like a time bomb. This will just give Russia time to regroup, rearm, and strike again. You mean like they did after they pulled out of the north? This is a war that we have to win on the battlefield with the help of our international partners. True. I want to sidebar this so bad, but I know we need to get moving, so I'll reserve. But it's basically the gist of what I wanted to say is it's really hard to win a war if all you're doing is pushing the invader out while they get to constantly regroup on their side of the border that you've already promised you wouldn't attack. That's not going to win your fucking war. You need to rain hell on their country too. At least on the border of their country where they're staging. I think that's fair to say. You can't just let them stop at your own border because they're just going to keep coming. They're like the tide. You're trying to push the tide back out, but it's going to come back. Just eradicate them on their side of the border. That'll send a message. Don't fuck with us. You shall not pass. Go Gandalf. Anyway, moving on. Day 153, Tuesday. So we're getting there. We're about halfway through. July 26th, day 153. And this man is Mike Waltz. He is GOP House Representative out of Florida. Sat down with Brett Baer. So this is of a Fox News interview on Monday to discuss his recent delegation trip to Kyiv and its implications on the U.S.-Ukraine relationship as the war enters now its 6th month. So I'm just going to read you his quote because I thought it was pretty good. He's quoted as saying, "So if we're not blind, we're legally blind. It's pretty close. And it's, I think, the risk of pilferage. Pilferage, if it does go into the black market. You ask me what is there, and we need to be aware of it." Sorry, his quote's a little jank. But I'm more concerned about how much of this is, or how much of it's breaking, how it's being used tactically, and how we can help them. I think the biggest point, though, is Zelensky feels like he's losing slowly, that the Biden administration is basically helping him play for a tie. And if it's these lines that are as subtle as they say are this winter, then essentially he's cut off from the ocean minus one port. Putin will hit a pause button, but it won't end the hostilities. He'll lick his wounds and he'll come at it again. We just talked about this. And why does that matter to the American people? If Putin continues to chew up Ukraine, he won't stop. He'll just continue on to Eastern Europe once he's done. And by letting Ukraine basically neuter the Russian army and then giving them what they need, what they've been begging for, then we can finally focus on China, which is where we need to be focused. So he's basically saying, look, we need to help them not play for a tie. We need to help them play to victory. If we help them play to victory, then we can go straight to dealing with this China-Taiwan situation instead of just dicking around between the two. But we're being led by an idiot, so we're kind of screwed. Anyway, moving on. This is the other Mike strike story. This is the Tuesday Odessa strike. There you go. See? Ukraine's coastline was again hit.
I approved.
Yeah. Ukraine's coastline was hit again Tuesday in a series of strikes less than a week after the landmark deal was signed to secure the safe port of food exports and products in the Black Sea, just days before the UN had planned its first shipment. Ukrainian President Zelensky took to Instagram to show the devastation in the small beach town of Zatoka in the Odessa region, some 35 miles south of the port city. An ordinary village of Zatoka. People rested here and lived, just lived, Zelensky wrote. No bases, no troops. Zelensky called Russian forces responsible for the attack terrorists and said everyone, every liberator who destroys our lives will be held responsible. He said liberator in quotes to mock them, because special operation. It is unclear if there were any casualties or how many missiles were fired on the former vacation hotspot. However, farther northeast along Ukraine's coastline, the port city of Mykolaiv was also hit in a series of 18 missile strikes with a Y, according to the regional military official on site. In the morning, we had 6 X-59 missiles from TU aircraft and 12 S-300s. Not all of them hit the target. Some were shot down, some missed, said the head of Mykolayev's regional military administration, Vitaly Kim. Kim said that some of the critical infrastructure was hit, but noted that there were no casualties. They destroyed 3 sections of the railway bridge that weren't even working, he says. In general, it was very loud. That's one hell of a report. The officials said that another strike also hit the port of Yuzhny, located in the Odessa region and roughly 50 miles from Mykolaiv. Though none of the news sources could find additional reports supporting the claim that Yuzhny was also hit. The series of strikes come just one day after a UN spokesperson said that the first shipment agreed to under the Black Sea Initiative would launch in a few days. The Joint Coordination Center will be liaising with the shipping industry and publishing detailed procedures for ships in the very near future. This came from Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for the Secretary General, and he said this in a reference to the operational headquarters in Turkey, where the UN, Ukraine, Russia will oversee Black Sea exports. The Tuesday strikes are the second attack on Ukrainian port cities in less than a week after officials from Kyiv and Moscow agreed to the deal to secure safe passage for merchant ships transporting critical exports to curb the global food crisis. The exact details on the agreement still remain unclear, but according to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the deal opened a path for significant volumes of commercial food exports from 3 Ukrainian key ports in the Black Sea: Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Yuzhny. Under the deal, Russia agreed to ceasefire in order to allow Ukrainian naval vessels to safely transport the merchant ships through mine-infested waters. Russia on Saturday denied striking Odessa and told Turkish officials that it would investigate the incident. In our contact with Russia, the Russians told us that they had absolutely nothing to do with this attack and that they were examining the issue very closely and in detail. This came from Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar. He said this in a statement according to Voice of America. The fact that such an incident took place right after the agreement we made yesterday really worried us. Unfortunately, nobody could be immediately reached at the UN for comment. Of course not, they're all playing golf. Moving on, speaking of the EU, I called this picture PU. And he didn't fall asleep, he says. Hang on, let me deal with this. There, I've spared him from himself. Scott, if you hear me, just PM me when you're done or awake, and I'll unmute you. Granted, he works a long day, so he's probably tired. Anyway, PU. Oh, sorry, I didn't read the chat. They're still talking about underwear. The Council of the European Union announced Tuesday that it will be renewing sanctions against Russia for at least 6 additional months. The Council... Oh, wait, you know what? Let me move him into AFK just in case. That way he can drag himself back in instead of snoring. That way he doesn't have to PM me. There we go. Alright. He'll jump in if he wakes up. Anyway. The Council today decided to prolong by 6 months until the 31st of January 2023 the restrictive measures targeting specific sectors of the economy of the Russian Federation. The press release stated as Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues through its 5th month. The sanctions, which the EU first imposed in 2014 and later expanded in February 2022, consist of restrictions on finance, energy, technology, and other industries. In addition to the economic sanctions on the Russian Federation, the EU has in place different types of measures in response to Russia's destabilizing actions against Ukraine. These include restrictions on economic relations with the illegally annexed Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, as well as the non-government controlled areas of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Individual restrictive measures, asset freezes, and travel restrictions on a broad range of individuals and entities, and diplomatic measures. The Council also called on Russia to immediately stop attacks against civilians in Ukraine and to, quote, unconditionally withdraw all troops and equipment from the region. Russia continued its offensive onslaught in Ukraine this week, including targeted airstrikes in the Black Sea regions of Odessa and Mykolaiv. In the Odessa region, a number of private buildings in villages on the coast were hit and caught fire, the report said. In the Mykolaiv region, port infrastructure was also targeted. Hours after the renewed strikes in the south, a Moscow-installed official in the southern Kherson region said the Odessa and Mykolaiv regions will soon be liberated by the Russian forces, just like the Kherson region further east. The developments came as Ukraine appeared to be preparing for a counteroffensive in the south. And yes, we will talk about that. But we're going to move on to Wednesday, and I'm back to that bridge again, because I lost the other picture earlier. So, earlier they attacked it. Now we're on Wednesday, July 27th, day 154, 2 days ago. Ukrainian forces took out a key bridge in Kherson, defense officials claimed on Wednesday, destroying Russia's plans as it looks to advance its troops in the south. Head of the Joint Coordination Press Center for the Ukrainian Defense Forces, Natalia Humeniuk, said that the high-precision strikes had hit the Antonovsky Bridge in an attempt to control Russian logistical and transportation routes. When pressed about the implications of Kyiv targeting its own infrastructure, Humeniuk told reporters, "We're not destroying infrastructure, we're destroying the enemy's plans." The bridge, which crosses the Dnieper River, has become a major strategic target for Ukrainian defense forces in recent weeks as they look to sever access between the Russian army in Kherson to occupied areas off the Crimean Peninsula. It is unclear what weapon was used to target the bridge, but comes as Ukraine has stalled Russian forces along the front lines with the aid of U.S.-supplied high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS. Oh, I think he went to bed. That's probably what the PM was. He's like, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. Anyway, the bridge was damaged last week as
I'm getting
Ukrainian
there.
forces sought to staunch Moscow's logistical corridor through UK defense officials as they believed that as of Friday, Russian forces had been able to repair it enough to get some traffic through. Post-telegram surfaced Tuesday night suggesting that there were explosions targeting the Antonovsky Bridge and Kirilo. Oh, wow. Kirilo Stremusov. Yeah. Who had been described as a collaborator for Russia, reported that there was damage to the thoroughfare following a series of strikes by Ukrainian forces, according to Pravda. The enemy is concentrating its main efforts on preventing the advance of our troops, Ukrainian defense officials said in an operational update Wednesday. The enemy actively uses UAVs for aerial reconnaissance. Yes, but we have updated the figures and they shot down quite a few of those. Ukrainian officials said Wednesday that German Mars 2 rocket systems and 3 more self-propelled Panzer howitzers, 2,000 howitzers, and had been delivered to Ukraine. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke with Ukrainian Minister of Defense Alexei Rezhnenko Tuesday about Washington's recent commitment to sending additional HIMARS. Ukrainian officials confirmed Russian forces have remained stalled on the front lines for 2 weeks following the successful deployment of said HIMARS. However, Rezhnenko had warned that Ukrainian forces will need at least 50 systems like the HIMARS to hold back Russian forces, and at least 100 of them for an effective counteroffensive. Well, yeah, you're going to want more because obviously they work, and it's like, hey, if they work this good now, if we had twice as many, they'd work even better. Clearly, that's what he's talking about. Moving on. Now, this is a kind of a feel-good story. Like, I'm pretty glad to share it, and I don't know why it showed up twice. Maybe it didn't. Okay, good. All right, so you may recognize this guy's face and his. Actually, he actually did his hair pretty good in this photo. Anyway, this is a positive story. A tongue-in-cheek petition to give outgoing British Prime Minister Boris Johnson Ukrainian citizenship and make him the country's prime minister has garnered over 2,500 signatures hours after being put up on Ukraine's official petition site on Tuesday. Despite losing domestic popularity and eventually having been forced out to announce his resignation after dozens of ministerial departures in early July, Johnson remains a cult figure in Kyiv for his vocal support of Ukraine as it fights off Russia's invasion. Paintings, murals, and even cakes in Ukraine's capital bear the likeness of the man some Ukrainians affectionately call Johnsoniuk. The petition addressed to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky lists Johnson's strengths as, quote, worldwide support for Boris Johnson, a clear position against the military invasion of Ukraine, and wisdom in the political, financial, and legal spheres. The petition, however, does acknowledge one negative side of such an appointment, its non-compliance with Ukraine's constitution. In an apparent coincidence, several hours after the petition was put up on Tuesday, Johnson presented Zelensky with the Sir Winston Churchill Leadership Award for what his Downing Street office described as incredible courage, defiance, and dignity in the face of Russia's invasion. Zelensky did not mention the new petition when accepting the award, but he will be obliged to officially respond if it receives 25,000 signatures. Accepting the award via video link from Kyiv, Zelensky quoted wartime British Premier Churchill, saying that Johnson, quote, had no thought of quitting the struggle when the going got tough. So yeah, the people of Ukraine want to defy the Ukrainian constitution, I guess in an emergency situation because they're in a war, and these things tend to happen during wars, to make Boris Johnson an official Ukrainian citizen, to then give him the position of prime minister of their country. And the only thing I can think of that is similar to this, I believe it was Chile, not Argentina, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Chile. They were in such a bad way, probably economically and just geopolitically in general. I believe it was in the 70s or 80s, that they ended up electing a Japanese businessman who came to the country and offered to help. And he was remembered as one of the most beloved leaders of their entire history. And they wanted to keep him there in that position, but he very humbly stepped down after his term was up and said, "This is your country, these are your people, I just came to help. You need to find somebody amongst yourselves to carry this work on." What a guy, right? And now they want to sort of do the same thing with Boris Johnson. Why not? It's like, well, the British obviously don't know what to do with you, but you have worth and value on a political scale. Come represent us. We'll make you one of us to give you this job if necessary. I mean, if I was Boris Johnson, I'd be tickled to death. I'd be like, yes, let's do it. Absolutely. Why not? I mean, think about spreading the influence of the crown. Eh? Then again, they did kick him out of his job. Maybe he doesn't care about spreading influence. Whatever. That station out of their country. What? I don't know. Moving on. Let's see. What do I got? Oh, we're into Thursday already. And we're almost at the end. Like, these stories, these last stories are actually pretty quick, which probably has Mike very excited. This picture is called Trapped. Yeah. Okay. So, Thursday, July 28th, day 155. So, yesterday. 2 o'clock-ish in the afternoon. Ukraine has made it clear that it intends to take back Kherson, a Russian-occupied city in the south, as its counteroffensive gains momentum. That's according to a Thursday update from the British Defense and Intelligence officials. You know, their daily briefing that I sometimes show you? Ukraine's efforts have virtually cut off Kherson and left thousands of Russian troops stationed near the Dnieper River highly vulnerable. Good, wipe them out. Little bighorn them. Britain's defense ministry said Ukrainian forces have probably established a bridgehead south of the Ingulets River and had used new long-range artillery to damage at least 3 of the bridges crossing the Dnieper. Russia's 49th Army stationed on the west bank of the Dnieper River now looks highly vulnerable, it said in a regular intelligence bulletin on Twitter, adding that Kherson was virtually cut off from the other territories occupied by Russia. The update continues. Its loss would severely undermine Russia's attempts to paint the occupation as a success. Ukraine has indicated that Russia has recently made a shift from attack to defense by redeploying troops from the east to the south. Meanwhile, Russian forces have launched major missile strikes on the Kyiv and Chernihiv regions. Ukraine and Russia have been at war since February 24th, when Russian President Putin ordered his forces into Ukraine in what Moscow called a special military operation to demilitarize and, quote, denazify the country. That is such a joke. Moving on. Now we're going to go into that thing called Statehood Day that they made a national holiday. Talked about it on the Sundays part of the stories. Yeah. Does that look like Statehood Day to you? That looks like utter chaos and devastation to me. Some 24 missiles rained down on northern Ukraine Thursday, hitting areas near Kyiv after rockets were fired from Russia, the Black Sea, and Belarus. An official from the Ukrainian Air Force told the news outlet Pravda that its defense system was not able to strike down all of the roughly 20 missiles before they made contact with their targets across the Kyiv region. At least 15 people have been reported as wounded, and an undisclosed number of soldiers in the Ukrainian army were killed after missiles hit a military unit. Deputy Chief of the Main Operational Directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexei Hromov, told Interfax. That was easy Cyrillic to read. Caliber cruise missiles were fired from the Black Sea. X-22 missiles from Tu-22M3 long-range bombers were fired from a Russian airfield roughly 160 miles from Ukraine's border, and short-range Iskander ballistic missiles were fired from the Gomel region in Belarus. Sidebar. Declare war on Belarus because them fuckers are attacking you. Duh. Anyway. The officials did not confirm who was responsible for the missile fire from Belarus, but comes as concerns mount over the former Soviet nation ordering troops into Ukraine in support of Russia. Just fucking preemptively just declare war on them. Half the country wants a revolution there. Maybe they'll help you out. You know, like the Chechens. I don't know if you guys know this, but Chechnya is basically split in 3, geopolitically speaking. There's a third that are fighting in Ukraine for Russia. There's a third of them fighting in Ukraine for Ukraine, and there's a third in Chechnya who really just don't give a shit. They just want to be left alone. Anyway, yeah, there's a civil war there, of sorts. Anyway. Earlier this month, Belarus ordered military drills to be carried out in the Gomel region, and it began distributing summons to men and women for mobilization exercises last month. Thursday's missile strikes come as Ukraine celebrates Statehood Day for the first time after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky created the national holiday last year. Oh, sorry, I guess it was last year they made it. The day marks the death of Kyiv's Prince Volodymyr the Great in 1015. Which Zelensky said in August of 2021 signified the christening of Ukraine. Though the holiday has been celebrated in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine since 2010, Russia renewed its threat on the capital city in a series of strikes Zelensky called missile terror. Restless morning again, missile terror, he said in his Telegram post. We will not give up. Do not intimidate us. Ukraine is an independent, free, and indivisible state, and it will always be like that, he added. And so we've made it to Friday. And I have 2 stories left for you. So we're almost there. And I got to go back to a picture I used earlier because I couldn't find a new one. So we're back to the HIMARS picture. Friday, July 29th. Today, day 156. 3:28 p.m. Ukrainian time is when the story broke. Russia's defense ministry on Friday claimed that at least 40 Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed after U.S. supplied HIMARS systems were used by Ukrainian armed forces to strike occupied territory in the Donbass and hit a Russian detention center. The Ukrainian defense official denied the claims and said it was likely a brutal execution of POWs. The officials say they have 99% certainty that this was a Russian strike. With a Y. I should have had a picture for that, huh? Anyway. Russia's defense ministry claims some 75 Ukrainian soldiers were also injured after a missile strike hit a pre-trial detention center in the area of the settlement of Olenivka, where Ukrainian military prisoners of war, including fighters from the Azov battalion, are being held. 8 detention center employees were allegedly injured to varying degrees of severity. Russian-backed separatist leader Denis Pushilin reportedly told Interfax that the detention center was located in the frontline town of Olenivka and housed over 190 detainees. The Armed Services of Ukraine released a statement and claimed Russia purposefully hit the detention center with the intention of covering up the torture of prisoners and shootings that have been carried out there and spreading propaganda by accusing Ukraine of committing war crimes. According to the commander of the Missile Forces and Artillery of the Land Forces Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Man, they're really masters at long titles, aren't they? Let me read that back to you. The commander of the Missile Forces and Artillery of the Land Forces Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Holy shit. The Armed Forces of Ukraine did not launch missile and artillery strikes in the area of Olenivka. That's what he's saying. The General Staff of the Armed Forces said that thanks to the high-precision weapons provided by Western allies, Ukrainian artillery troops are able to conduct exceptionally accurate strikes. With a Y, of course. Moving on. We made it to the last story of the day, gentlemen, because there was one other one that I'm not sure I want to talk about, but I'll make it a mention in passing with Mike here before we sign off for the day. Here we go. That is a giant cargo ship. I believe it's called the Navistar. Or Navstar. Ukraine is ready to export the first, this is Friday, this is today's news, 6:50 p.m. as a matter of fact. Ukraine is ready to export the first shipment of grains from the Odessa region, President Zelensky said Friday, adding that he is waiting the signal from partners to release the vessels. The first ship is being loaded since beginning of this war. This is a Turkish vessel. This shows that the port has started working, Zelensky says, during his visit to the port in the Odessa region. Earlier this week, officials from the UN, Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia were scrambling to finalize details on how to safely transport ships through the Black Sea as Russian forces continue to pummel Ukraine's coastline. Despite the landmark deal reached between Kyiv and Moscow last week in an attempt to circumvent the global food crisis, Russian forces launched a series of missile strikes on the Ukrainian port cities after agreeing to a limited ceasefire. Under the agreement, Russia agreed not to attack Ukrainian naval vessels or port infrastructure as Ukraine attempts... I have an upset dog somewhere. Huh. Sorry. She's very needy. Where did I leave off? Under the agreement, Russia agreed not to attack Ukrainian naval vessels or port infrastructure as Ukraine attempts to offload 22 million tons of grain to vulnerable and developing nations from Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Yuzhny. However, Russia hit Odessa in a missile strike Saturday with a Y, followed by several attacks just days later in the Odessa coastal towns of Yuzhny and Zatoka. Our side is fully prepared, We sent all the signals to our partners, the UN and Turkey, and our other military guarantees the security situation, Zelensky said Friday. The Minister of Infrastructure is in direct contact with the Turkish side and the UN. We are waiting for a signal for them that we can start. The UN condemned Russia's repeated strikes over the last week, but officials involved in the Black Sea Grain Initiative pushed forward with the deal. On Wednesday, Deputy Spokesman for the UN Security General Farhan Haq championed the opening of the Joint Coordination Center in Istanbul. UN officials this week said that they were hopeful that the first shipment of grain and other products would leave Ukrainian ports Friday. However, as of Thursday, Undersecretary General of Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths said crucial details were still being hammered out. That is a detailed negotiation based on the agreement, Griffiths told the UN member states in a Thursday briefing, first reported to Reuters. It's not just a matter of whether there is a ship or 2 or 3 available in the ports ready to move out. They need to move safely, and that means we have to be clear where exactly the channel is, he says. And that is the last more or less real story I have. There was one other story out there, and I didn't want to talk about this too much, and I sort of didn't really task Night Strike with this, but there is a video that got released today, and I tried like the dickens to find it, but I'm pretty sure that it got sort of censored out. Anyway, what it was is it was of a Russian soldier basically castrating a Ukrainian POW with a box cutter, more or less. They held him down, they, flayed him, basically. And then the reports were that that soldier was executed after even that happened to him. Now, I'm sure that this is going to be expanded upon in the coming days, if true. And if I do find the video, I don't know how I'm going to share it. I don't want to put it on air. I might put it on the server so you can come in and just click it and watch it yourselves, but I'm not going to force it upon you through YouTube because they'll probably shut down the video. So if I find it, then I'll share it. But yeah, supposedly there's a video of mutilation. So I wanted to talk about it, but I needed to corroborate it first, but that was the last story that hit my feed just before we went on air. So it's out there. It may become the first story we discuss next week on the War Room as the first story. Hard to say, but because I can say it, I can also play this because I have expended an hour and 43 minutes of your time, and I did manage to keep it under 2 hours this week. So anyway, if you're new to my channel, if you're new to my channel, welcome. But if you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlists and see if my other interests might be of interest to you. There are links to join my Discord server in the description of the video. You are more than welcome to do so. If you want to host a show here, I can probably help you with that too, because I've had a couple people inquire about that this week for various reasons. Anyway, this was the War Room. This was day 156, and we will be back next week, yet again, because the war is not over. Slava Ukraini, and good night.
Heroyam Slava.